On the 31st of May 2023, Spanish side Sevilla beat Italian side Roma in the Europa League final, European football's second most prestigious tournament. For Sevilla, it was a record-extending 7th triumph in the competition and the 5th time they'd won it in just 9 years. On the face of things then, everything seemed perfect, but all of a sudden, things very much weren't. This is Sevilla, a footballing giant that's starting to crumble. The story of Sevilla begins in 1890, where they became Spain's first club solely dedicated to football. Despite this though, they were never really one of the country's most successful teams, winning Spain's top division just once in 1946, prompting significant spending in the early 90s with the hope of firing the club into becoming a Spanish powerhouse. Stars like Diego Maradona and a young Davos Suker had been brought in with the goal of winning La Liga in the coming years, except despite showing promise and signs of success, the Sevilla project never really got going, failing to win a single trophy across the decade, qualifying for Europe just once, with Diego Maradona leaving after just a single underwhelming season in Andalusia, with Suker following him a few years later moving to Real Madrid as the club found themselves placed into administration and in a financial hole. Sevilla's big gamble to become La Liga champions had failed, and by 1997 they found themselves in the second tier, after 4 directors and 10 managers had been churned through in just 4 years between 1996 and 2000, which is where our story starts to change. In 2000, former Sevilla player and youth graduate Ramon Rodriguez Verdejo, nicknamed Monchi, was appointed director of football with the objective of turning the club's misfortune around. Monchi utilised a recruitment strategy aimed at producing players through their youth academy or acquiring them young and cheaply from elsewhere, developing them in-house so they were good enough to improve the team before selling them at a big profit to keep the cycle going and to help dig the club out of their debts. And despite it sounding pretty obvious and straightforward, this strategy was incredibly successful. Sevilla were promoted in Monchi's first season as director, then finishing 8th in their first season back in La Liga a year later, before qualifying for Europe in 2004 and winning the Europa League for the first time ever in 2006, an important win because it sparked a cultural shift in the Andalusian capital. Both Sevilla and their city rivals Real Betis had made their names as big clubs within Spanish football with a loyal fan base. However, neither had really been able to achieve a prolonged run of major honours to increase their stature within the sports. That was until this first European win for Sevilla. In the 06-07 season, they would win the Europa League for the second time in a row, as well as beating reigning Spanish and European champions Barcelona in the Super Cup, finishing the season off with a Copa del Rey win and then another one 3 years after that. By 2017, Sevilla had qualified for the Europa League 9 times during Monchi's reign, winning it in 5 of them, as well as becoming a common feature in the top 5 of La Liga, even finishing 3rd place twice, their highest finish since 1951. Monchi's youth academy and transfer recruitment overhaul had also been massively successful as well, with the club producing stars like Sergio Ramos and Jesus Navas, who would both go on to win the World Cup with their country in 2010, as well as signing cheap stars like Dani Alves and Ivan Rakitic before selling them on for huge profits. This consistent success not only helped raise the profile of the club worldwide, but it also helped to raise the profile of Monchi, who in the summer of 2017 would leave the club for pastures new, having been tempted by a move to the capital of Italy, becoming the director of AS Roma. With Monchi in charge, Sevilla won 11 trophies and made more than 200 million in transfer profit, having been in the second tier in financial disrepair when he initially joined, and so his loss left a huge hole that needed to be filled, which would finally occur 2 years later by Monchi. Despite huge ambitions going into his move to Italy, Monchi's time in Rome didn't really have the same level of success that he'd seen at Sevilla, with a Giallorossi dropping from a 2nd place finish before he joined to a 6th place one in his final season. Monchi had attempted to fix Roma's ageing squad with a few young signings, however they mainly failed to settle in Rome, alongside a few older, more expensive signings that didn't really make sense having the same issue. 29-year-old Steven Nzonzi and Javier Pastore had both joined for over 50 million euros combined and failed to make any real impact, where it became clear things weren't really working out in Rome, with Monchi leaving after less than 2 seasons to rejoin the Sevilla side he had just departed. The director of football's homecoming came with much excitement and anticipation, with Sevilla fans, who themselves had seen a similar fate to Monchi's Roma side in the years without him, eager to see their club rise back from 7th and 6th place finishes into the Champions League qualification spots they'd previously been achieving. However, Monchi himself had a bigger vision, and one that ended up being the catalyst for the downfall we've seen from the club in recent years. He wanted the title. In Monchi's 2 seasons away from Spanish football, the big 3 sides in the league, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid and Barcelona, all saw their squads weakened. Not only did they each have many aging stars that were past their peak, but they had all also lost key players in Cristiano Ronaldo, who left Real to go to Juventus in 2018, Neymar, who'd left Barcelona to go to PSG in 2017, and Antoine Griezmann, who would depart Atleti in Monchi's first summer back in Seville. Therefore, Monchi believed the next few seasons offered a rare opportunity to pip the big teams to the title, and so his transfer policy changed, from being focused on financial stability and slow and steady growth, to risky signings with the aim of short-term success. In his first summer back, Sevilla may have cashed in notable fees on Wissam Ben Yedder, Luis Muriel and Pablo Sarabia amongst others. However, they also invested significantly too, at a level never really seen before. Jules Koundé, Ronnie Lopez and Youssef En-Nesyri all joined on fees of €20 million or more, as well as a rare gamble under Monchi of signing older players well within their peak years to try and achieve his title ambition. Javier Hernandez, Luke de Jong and Fernando all joined, and as much as not all of these signings worked out, at first it seemed like Monchi's changed philosophy and transfer market gamble had paid off, as Sevilla won the Europa League once again in Monchi's first season back, whilst also managing a top 4 finish. The following few windows would see the arrival of Alejandro Gomez and a return for Ivan Rakitic, both aged 32, a 29-year-old Thomas Delaney and a 28-year-old Marcos Acuna. Monchi's gamble for domestic success seemed to be paying off though midway through the 2021-22 season, with the club finding themselves above both Barcelona and Atletico Madrid as their only real challengers to Real Madrid for the title. However, a collapse in the second half of the season saw them win just 5 of their final 17 games, dropping down to a 4th place finish for the 3rd season in a row, showing no substantial progress towards Monchi's goal of winning the league, with Sevilla's success about to fall off a cliff. The summer of 2022 saw their squad massively weakened as both Jules Koundé and Diego Carlos, the heart of their defence which had been the engine for their recent success, leaving the club for a combined €80 million, as the financial consequences of their heavy spending over the previous few seasons started to come into play. You see, not only had the club been spending beyond their means in the previous few seasons, but they had also inadvertently picked the worst time to ever do this, with the COVID-19 pandemic hitting less than a year after Monchi's return to the club. Yet despite this, the club kept spending, putting themselves in a very dangerous position. A terrible start to the 22-23 season followed, leading to the dismissal of Julian Lopetegui with the club 17th in the table just above the relegation zone, not getting any better when his replacement Jorge Sampaoli had been unable to improve form, also being sacked with the club in the exact same position in late March, having overseen a 3rd place finish in the Champions League group stage, until a remarkable turnaround by Jose Luis Mendilibar not only saw the club secure a 12th place finish, but he was also able to lead them to their 7th Europa League title, beating the likes of Manchester United, Juventus and Monchi's former side Roma in the final. This success though only really papered over the cracks momentarily, as straight after this win Sevilla would effectively invite transfer negotiations for their entire squad, having lost €90 million since the start of COVID alone, with an overall club debt of over €220 million. Ronnie Lopez, Yassine Bounou and Jesus Corona were all sold for €25 million combined, the same fee that Sevilla had spent on Ronnie Lopez alone just a few years earlier, with Gomez and Osama Idrissi both having their contracts terminated simply to get their wages off the books. In January, Ivan Rakitic and Fernando would join them, also leaving on a free, as Sevilla found themselves struggling on the pitch once again, going through 3 managers for the 2nd season consecutively, whilst finishing 14th in the league, their worst since 2000, the year Monchi first took over as director. And as for Monchi himself, well, he also left in the summer of 2023, linking up with former Sevilla manager Unai Emery at Aston Villa, with the Andalusian side finding themselves in a terrible position going into this season, with a significant debt still hanging over them and a squad that had fallen apart in just a few years. The summer of 2024 had seen another mass exodus as Victor Orta, Monchi's replacement, attempted to pick up the pieces in Seville. Lucas Ocampos, Yusuf En-Nesyri, Marcos Acuna and many more all left the club, with incomings largely being cheap young players using the same process that built the club up in the first place. Except this isn't just going to be an easy turnaround. They're still in a huge amount of debt, having received a huge €100 million loan in March to try and stabilise the club, and results on the pitch aren't exactly fantastic either, with the club 13th in the table at the time of writing this, set for a third consecutive season in the bottom half of La Liga, and the second one without any European football, with this downfall largely coming at the hands of their former club president Jose Castro, and of course Monchi in a pretty ironic fashion. In 2000, when Monchi first took over as director, Sevilla found themselves in the second division thanks to reckless spending due to an over-ambitious goal to win the La Liga title, with Monchi having to rescue the club. And in 2024 they find themselves in a very similar position, this time with Monchi creating the problem rather than fixing it. However, all hope is not lost. They still have an incredible scouting and youth system as well as a significantly elevated global status, both largely down to Monchi, and so with patience and smart business, who's to say Sevilla won't be back in the European spot soon? But for now, that couldn't look much further away.